Hands go up, so thank you very much. So welcome everyone to the Data Futures Alpha Pilot Q&A session. I'll just do a quick intro of who we've got on the session today. We will put our cameras on once we've done a sort of quick introduction after this couple of slides that I've got here. So to introduce myself, I'm Emily Carter. I'm one of the project managers working on Data Futures. So I'm responsible for the kind of business change elements and the data elements, so obviously hence why I'm the one here doing most of the presentation today. I've also got Alice Redfern on the call. Don't know, Alice, if you want to say hello?
Hello, yeah, Alice Redfern, Head of Service Development at HISA.
Thanks, Alice. We've got Hannah Brown.
Morning all, I'm Liaison and Operations Analyst here at HISA.
Thanks, Hannah. We've also got Charlie Hodgkiss.
Hi there, yeah, I work in liaison team at HISA.
And I believe we've also got Annette Vansel, who's our Programme Director. Whether she's made it on yet. Possibly not, hopefully she'll be.
Her audio's on, so I'm going to help Annette out and then she.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Laura. And then as you'll have heard as well, we've also got Laura Jackson, who's helping from our training team to facilitate the session today. So again, thank you all for coming. I'm just going to do I've got a couple of slides just to sort of give a bit of an intro, and then I really want to just open the floor for questions. We're going to do questions through the question functionality within GoToWebinar. So just type away any questions that you've got in there and we'll do our best to answer them. Obviously, depending on how many questions we get, we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. Anything we don't get to, we will come back to as a written response and send that out to everyone that's been here today, and also publish on our Alpha pages. So just to give a bit of a quick update on where we've got so far. So obviously Data Futures has had a bit of a stop change in the last sort of few years, but we're building a lot of momentum across the programme at the moment, and obviously the engagement and communication with the sector has started to really increase. We appreciate at the moment it's been a really difficult time for everyone with the pandemic and the sort of uncertainty around the burden review, but we're really starting to sort of feel that traction again now, which is really great. We are continuing to do our system development for the HISA data platform alongside JISC. We're also continuing to refine the data model and all the sort of quality assurance pieces that goes with that, so the derived fields and our quality rules and the credibility reporting, that sort of thing. We are working towards an implementation of 22-23. Some of you will have seen there was an announcement yesterday. I've got a slide coming up on that in a second, sort of just reaffirming that, because I appreciate there's been quite a lot of uncertainty going on. So we just wanted to be able to kind of put a bit more certainty around that. And then just to say that obviously with burden review and the sector being obviously a little bit up in the air a little bit at the moment as it feels, we're working very closely with all the statutory customers to work out what the impacts that burden review outcome may have on the programme and the sector as a whole.
Emily, so sorry to interrupt, and we've just noticed you're sharing a note screen. Would you mind sharing your other screen, please?
Yes, absolutely. My apologies on that one.
No, that's okay. I've had lots of windows open as well.
Does that look better?
That's the same one again.
Oh, I don't know why it's doing that. Nope. That one working? Or is that even worse now?
That's where, yeah, I think if you pop it in
there eventually,
it might be better under sharing. If you maybe select the window more so than a screen, then you might be able to pick the specific one.
Right.
There we go, perfect.
Get there eventually. Sorry about that, everyone. This is why I'm not a technical project manager, because technology clearly goes too far out of my limits.
I'm sure we've all had experiences like that. Everybody's probably nodding on the call.
Hopefully. So thank you for bearing with me. Got there eventually. So just to say, obviously, the announcement that we made yesterday around the transition year was that we had an agreement at our programme board that we will be doing an annual collection for the 22-23 collection using the data platform and the Data Futures data model. So we are still kind of for grabs in terms of the timings for this, whether we'll be using the reference period 3 timescales or whether we use the current student or student alternative collection. So whether that's a sign off in September or November, we haven't quite got down to that level of detail yet in our planning. We we've got some workshops internally to work out what the best approach for that will be. So hopefully we'll be able to give a bit more clarity on that in the coming months, if not weeks, if we'll try to. But we just wanted to be able to, as soon as we'd made a decision, be able to let everyone know that that's where our thinking is going. There is still a requirement that we will do a mandatory trial of sorts, or some kind of trial, but we haven't. Again, we're also, as part of the looking at the timings for this, we'll be looking exactly what that approach would be and what best suits the sector, appreciating obviously there's a lot of pressure in there at the moment, so we're just trying to work out exactly the best way of doing that. Again, still talking about conversations with our statutory customers about the 23-24 implementation, because that's one that's going to be where essentially the outcomes of the burden review will be able to be implemented, if there is anything that comes out of that, and depending on what those outcomes are. So just to say that we are still having those conversations and we're trying to narrow down exactly what that could look like, but appreciate obviously the burden review consultation needs to come first before we can make any final decisions on those, but just to give you a heads up on that one. So on to alpha. So why does Data Futures need an alpha? It's kind of, I suppose it feels like a difficult question, given we know that there's obviously a lot of pressure on with COVID and all the number of consultations and plate juggling that everyone's doing at the moment. So just to say that actually for Data Futures, this is quite a critical phase for us. It's kind of our first opportunity for providers and more stakeholders to really get involved in looking at the system and telling us what works, what doesn't. It's helping us sort of minimize any risks. So if there are things that don't work in the system as we are expecting them to, we've got time to put that right before we go into sort of beta and get close to go live, because we know that trying to make changes that late into the project makes it very difficult for people to be able to engage with it. So we're trying to de-risk as best as possible. But essentially our technology phase within the project, and also some of our data side, is at a kind of a meaningful place where actually we can get some really good feedback, where there's enough to be able to show you and for you to be able to engage with, to be able to get some real feedback. It is kind of our last point where we can make real significant changes. So if there is something that really doesn't work, or the workflow doesn't work as we were expecting it to, that we can make those changes without fundamentally having to rechange our entire design of the system. But hoping that actually we'll be able to begin to test some of the sort of the solution and whether it's fit for purpose, and actually how what we've learned so far can help shape engagement and communication with the sector going sort of for those that aren't involved in alpha. So our approach, we've given a bit of an update as part of the email, but essentially we want to go to more kind of what we're deeming as moderated user testing. But essentially we want to be able to do an alpha that's got providers and statutory customers. We're thinking it's about sort of 10 days interaction between May and August of this year. That's to say that that's kind of where we're thinking. That doesn't mean if you've got more time that you're able to spend on this, then absolutely we would be more than thrilled to be able to say, yeah, we've got lots of things that we can help test, but we're appreciating that we know things are very difficult for yourselves as providers at the moment. So we didn't want to set a bar too high and preclude people from being able to participate. So hopefully that's something that is manageable. But again, as I said, anyone that's got potential options to work more than that, we would certainly be more than happy to take that one on board. We'll be taking it obviously online. I know in the previous phase we had done a lot of face-to-face workshops, but obviously given the pandemic, actually we've done a lot of working through Microsoft Teams, and I think has worked really, really well. So we'd like to continue that, but we would also like to do a mixture of one-to-one sessions as well as sort of group workshops. So just trying to put a bit of variety in there as well. So as I said, it's going to be moderated user testing, so it's more just so we can understand exactly how the system is being used. So giving you essentially a scenario to say, I'd like you to upload these files and work through any of the potential issues that come up throughout that, or any of the quality assurance concerns that come up that, and then actually us as the project team can be able to kind of view what you're doing, so that actually we can understand better from your perspective how you approach doing that, and also being able to get that feedback much more quickly than we would have done if obviously you're going away and doing that elsewhere sort of at base without us watching and then getting the feedback later. So it's just trying to make sure that we've got a few different approaches, but that, again, that wouldn't be to preclude to say that actually you'd only have to do it in those usability sessions. Actually you could go away and do this not specifically to those workshops. Obviously, we would like to do some unmoderated testing as well, but just want to make sure that actually there's an absolute bare minimum which gets us what we need to. That's kind of where we're looking at going. Again, we want to put that into more of a bite-sized chunk, so actually focusing on a specific area. So whether actually we're focusing on credibility or data migration or something like that. So just rather than saying, here's the whole system, go run wild, because that could be quite daunting, I can imagine. So we're just trying to make sure that actually we're chunking it up into the best way possible, and hopefully that should mean that engagement should also help as well, because at least you've got a clear view on exactly what the expectations are for each of those sessions. I've had a couple of questions around software solutions and some nervousness about people being able to be involved in Alpha, not knowing that all their software solutions are available. There's no expectation that sort of you'll have any full solutions available for your software houses for any of you that have them, or even in-house. But we would like to encourage, we've been having conversations with our software suppliers about kind of getting some involvement during Alpha as well, to say some of them that are ready with very early kind of testing, that we would want to do that. But again, it shouldn't preclude you if your software houses aren't ready. That doesn't mean that you can't be involved in Alpha. We've done it in such a way that we can provide test files up front, or we've got a data entry tool where we can add data into the system. So we know it's going to be on a much smaller scale, but so just to say that shouldn't preclude anyone in applying if they did want to. And then just to state as well that initially we're not going to be using real student data, we're going to be using test data, and then we'll build in the use of student data into the summer, just because this is a sort of, from a data protection point of view, it makes it much easier that we can kind of test the actual system, make sure there's nothing there, and then we can say, yep, we've done enough tests there, everything seems to be working as we were expecting, and then we can start putting real student data into the system if we need to. I know there are certain scenarios that actually will mean we'll get a more robust test if we've got student data, and also hoping that as well that given, I know there's been given the pressures on yourselves that many of you might not have quite got to a point where you've fully taken in all of the data model changes as well. So hopefully this might give us a bit more of an opportunity to have made some of those changes as well. But again, we need to just have a look at that holistically with the group, whoever become the eventual participants in Alpha. So expectations, again, this is kind of being pulled from the email that was sent, but we want to be able to do a full end-to-end. There's using test files that we'll provide, and then later on using real data, and again via a data entry tool, or if any of you are available or the software houses do happen to be available, then you can generate it through your own systems, but certainly not the expectation that it's all going to be all bells and whistles from the beginning. We want to be able to engage with the data model and the guidance and the rules and those sorts of things that are already built into the system, and getting feedback on how they work. Usability of the system, making sure that any bugs hopefully we've found most of them in our own internal testing, but I'm sure there'll be things that you'd be able to find for us. So making sure that we identify any of those and are able to bring that into the system going forward. And I think the big part for us is actually supporting on the approach to data migration. This is something that it's a big challenge for us of actually doing that transition year quality assurance, where we're changing data models and systems. So actually one of the things that we'd like to do is test that with yourselves, as actually this is what our approach is. Does that actually work for you or not? And how can we work in the best way possible, hopefully with a spread of providers across scale, should help give us a real insight for that too. Bit of a timeline, hopefully none of this is too new information for you, but just to say that expressions of interest will close on the 6th of April. So you've still got a couple of weeks to sort of have a think about whether actually being involved in Alpha is something that you would like to do. Then we'll be awarding and announcing who the participants are on the 12th of April. Alongside that announcement, we'll also be sending the lucky participants their participation agreements. So this is, in order for you to be able to access the system, we need to have legal agreements in place. So more just to give you a heads up that that will need to come. So any processes that you need to have in place internally in terms of getting that signed off or reviewed, just to give you a heads up that it'll be around the 12th of April that we'll be sending those out, and they will need to be signed back to us before you're allowed access onto the system. So just to give you a bit of a heads up on that one. We're hoping to do some kind of kickoff the week commencing the 26th of April. This will involve kind of familiarization sessions with the system, a bit of training on kind of roughly how to use it, bit of an overview, how we're expecting to approach this, sort of these are the sort of workshops that we'll be doing and those sorts of things. So we'll be doing something the week commencing the 26th. 3rd of May is when the actual system, the HESA data platform, will be available, where we'll be able to use it with test data, and when we'll be starting the moderated user testing. We'll be running that through kind of either on a weekly or fortnightly basis. We haven't kind of, again, it's something that once we've got the group of participants, actually what would work best, but wanting to be able to get to a position where we've got sessions in the diary throughout that period to say this is what we want to be working on at these times. Once we get to kind of July of this year, we want to be able to allow live data and student data into the system, and then continuing some of those testing, either redoing some of the tests when we've got a system that's got live data in it, or some of the tests that we wouldn't have been able to do in the same way without being able to put live data in the system. We're expecting that the testing of the sort of where we've pitched it as moderated user testing would finish around mid-August. But what we would like to do is explore with providers that are interested in, obviously that want to be in alpha, is actually what more we could do with them through to the end of the year. Essentially, we would like to carry on with some testing because we're still going to be developing. We want to be able to ideally use that group as a sounding board for things, and also some of the extra refinement of the features that we'll be still developing is making sure that we're going on the right track. So one of the big things that will be in there afterwards is around our approach to historic amendments, which is the replacement for the fixed database. So actually that's something that would be really, really helpful to be able to get some more feedback on if we're able to. But we also appreciate that that's a very busy time of year for yourselves with the with your collection window. So it's not an absolute you have to be able to, but it would be really useful from our perspective to know if we can or can't have those kind of sessions with at least a group of you. So functionality that will be available, sorry, skipping across, is, like I said, there's a full end-to-end process available. It will be kind of, it's not going to be complete functionality. It's very much the minimum requirements across that end-to-end. So it allows that we can go through that submission and validation process. We can do approval and sign off. Data entry tools going to be there. There'll be basic quality rules and credibility in there. We're able to do the data deliveries. We can, whether it's integration with issue management and using IDS, those sorts of things that you would kind of expect to see there, but just to say that it will still very much be the bare minimum, and there is still more to be developed on top of that. We just want to be able to check that actually the underlying principles are valid. Just to give a bit of there's obviously our data model 1.7.0 has been published. That is the model that we are using for alpha. We know there is a bug in the XSD, so that will go up to 1.8.0, but there will be no changes to the data model. It's just fixing a bug, so that hopefully should be going out in the next few weeks. We're just working on the final iterations of fixing that bug. We've got an e-learning published, so there's a link there to it on our website. We've got alpha pages that we're going to continuously update. So those of you that will be selected to be involved in alpha will be doing a lot of the kind of day-to-day working in the in our sort of team site, but actually we would like to then make sure that everyone else is also involved in what's going on. So we've created these alpha pages, and we'll be using that to share information more widely. And then, as ever, the liaison team is always there, so to either email or pick up the phone to be able to help with any questions. And if they don't know themselves, they can pass it on to us as the programme team, but most of the time they absolutely nail the questions themselves. They're a fabulous team for us there. So I've rattled on for a good sort of 15-20 minutes now, so this is an opportunity to open up for questions. So if you could type the questions using the questions functionality, and we'll get through, as I said earlier, as many as possible, and any that we don't answer, we'll answer in writing and share on the HESA website afterwards. So I'll just give you a few minutes to be able to squirrel away any questions, and then I've got Charlie as my sort of quiz master today of helping sort of filter through the questions and make sure that we answer them all that way. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily, for that update. So I'm going to turn my webcam on now, and I've turned my mic on. So we've had lots of questions through so far, so thank you for those. We did have 1 or 2 questions raised prior to the session, so I just want to address that one first. So the first question we had was, how will generation and submission of the XML fit into the alpha pilot? will we be able to generate or submit our own XML, or will this be done through the data entry tool? So essentially, it's completely up to you on how you want to do it. Obviously, it's fantastic if you do have software systems to generate your XML file. It's a lot easier for you, and we can obviously test more areas of the specification and the model. But if you did want to use the data entry tool, then it's completely up to you. Obviously, that is a piece of technology that we've produced for Data Future, so we also want to stringently test that as well. So ideally, we'd have a mixture of those using software and also those using the HESA data entry tool as well to do those. Did anyone else want to comment on that one?
I think you covered it perfectly from my perspective.
Super. And the second question was, there is mention of the possibility of real data being entered into the data entry tool. Would this be existing student data, i.e. data which will eventually be submitted in the current student return at the point of the alpha pilot? Yeah, we probably anticipate it does. Obviously, the student return you'll submit in October, November time is retrospectively, so stuff that's happening now. So we'd certainly expect you to be using that as your real data in the summer when we allow that to come through. And obviously, the benefit of using your own student data is we can sort of test more levels of the specification. And also would anticipate actually if you were to use your own student data that you'll be returning in October time, there might be a couple of tweaks that you might need to make to your data to sort of conform with the reference period dates that we will have in alpha. So that's also a good test in your understanding of the quality rules that might be produced or the schema rules, and how you're understanding how it's resolved those issues. So that would certainly be a good test from our perspective as well. Right, I'm going to go through the questions that were submitted during the webinar. So the first question is there reliance on software systems in the beta? I presume by the beta we mean alpha. So is there reliance on software systems in the alpha?
So not within alpha, but if it is for beta, yes, there would be for beta. That is where we would hope that when we get to that stage that we would have software houses in place, and you'd be able to have software systems in place to be able to put data through it that way, not necessarily just using the data entry tool, which is what we kind of expected for alpha.
Superb. Second question, do you anticipate that the pilot will cover the whole of the specification? So we certainly hope to. Obviously the specification is published and the data model, so we'd want to stringently test all areas of the specification. And I suppose a comment from myself is obviously the alpha pilot is testing the technology of the system itself, but also this is a good chance to actually test the specification, the guidance and the coverage that we've got published as well. Because obviously that hasn't been as stringently reviewed yet. So we want to take that as a good opportunity to make sure that there's full understanding of the requirements of the data, and see if we can use any feedback to improve that area as well. Right, let's go on to the next one. Will the pilot be delivered in a way that reflects testers' actual devolved administration needs? For example, Scottish testers only working on Scottish relevant data / rules. Yeah, we certainly hope so. Yeah. So with most of the quality rules, they'll all have a primary regulator. So if you're a Scottish institution submitting to a Scottish provider, you'll be tested on the SFC regulators as well. So it should be an accurate reflection of the type of quality rules you should expect once we go live as well. The next question, will we just be testing technology or opportunity to feedback on guidance? So yeah, we'll certainly be picking up any guidance feedback as well, and trying to improve what we currently have in there. So involvement in alpha is not guaranteed. What are the selection criteria?
Yeah, do you want me to handle this one? Just see everyone sort of pausing to take a breath. So it was one of those things that we were really unsure. We know that it's been a really difficult time for providers, so we weren't sure how many providers we would get sign up. But we have, as of when I checked yesterday, we already had 12 come in, which was really fantastic. So we are going to have to go through, I think, a sort of criterion process. What we're looking for is a split of providers across nations, across sort of provision, ideally also across software houses, just so that we can get a spread across that as well. So depending on obviously ultimately how many we get across the board and what the split looks like, it will probably end up being a sort of, we've got a pool of people that are, I don't know, approved providers that use SITs. We would probably say, right, we probably need 2 of those, say, and then it will be kind of names into a hat, first drawn out. It will be, but we want to make sure that we've got that sort of provision to make sure we've got Scottish, Northern Ireland, England approved VCAP, Wales. We want to make sure we've got all of those. We've got SITs users, we've got in-house providers. We want to, where possible, make sure we've got that split. So some of it won't be the most robust. It will be a name out the hat, but there are sort of criteria that we're looking for. I don't know if Alice has anything else you want to add on that.
No, not particularly. I think the main thing is that spread. We want to make sure it's representative. So, you know, I don't think we want to discourage people from applying, but having, like Emily says, a range of different types of provision, different geographic areas, different experience levels, you know, in terms of how long people have been doing HESA returns, all of those kind of things will be really, really valuable to us. But the alpha isn't the only opportunity to engage, would be the other thing. So I think even if you apply but aren't selected, that doesn't mean you can't provide feedback. We'll be looking at other ways to engage.
Super. Next question, what does integration with issue management mean in practice? So I'm happy to take this one on. So essentially what we currently have as legacy is a one-way street. Your data is submitted data collection system, it's committed, and then our analysts work in the background to create queries in the issue management system. You then depart over to issue management system, answer the queries in there, and then we then dive over to the data collection system to progress. In data futures, what you have is a two-way street.